Hello again and welcome to It's Your Yard. As you can see, there have been a few changes since the last time we got together. Our yard right now is in the middle of a major midlife makeover, trying to make it more in tune with our family's needs and at the same time make most efficient use of water. The goal of water-saving gardening, or xeriscaping, is to create surroundings that look beautiful, meet your family's needs, and require the least amount of water to remain that way. Why do we need to do this? Here on planet Earth, we live in a closed environmental system. The same water cycled from ocean to atmosphere, to rainfall, to river, to ocean, again, over and over from time immemorial into the future as far as that may reach. The water we have today is all the water we will ever have, and the demands on that water supply are increasing tremendously. It makes sense to treat it wisely and use it responsibly. Today, we are going to deal with the next two principles of the 7 principles of xeriscaping: appropriate use of lawn areas and how to conserve water by letting the outdoor environment around your home reflect the environment of the region. In other words, by selecting plants that can get along quite nicely with just the moisture that nature provides, or at any rate, close to it. If you'd like to follow the process as we go along, you can make your own notes or use this handy workbook. At the end of today's show, I'll give you the details on how to get your own copy. Remember, no matter where you live, whether it's on the prairie, in the mountains, on a floodplain, or by the seacoast, it makes sense to xeriscape. Designing a garden to use as little water as possible can increase the value of your property, save money, help the environment, and provide a challenge that is both fun and rewarding.
Although most of the earth is covered with water, only 3% of that water is available for human consumption, agriculture, industry, recreation, and gardening.
To get started on our xeriscape makeover, we decided what activities we wanted to use our yard for, what we had here we wanted to keep, what we wanted to get rid of, and where our problem areas were. We also decided how much we wanted to spend and what parts of the job we felt comfortable doing ourselves. That way we knew exactly what the job would cost and how long it would take. We also had a landscape architect take my wish list and my sketches and convert them into a finished plan so that we would know exactly what was needed. First, we found out what permits we needed from the city. In our case, it was a building permit for the new deck. We also had the underground utility lines marked. Then we removed the existing trees that were too close to the property line and fence. We had the soil tested and found out what we needed to add to it to increase its ability to absorb and hold water and nutrients and improve the workability of the soil. Then came the application of the herbicide glyphosate to eliminate the thistles and weeds. Glyphosate is available under a number of trade names, including Roundup, Erase, Sidekick, and Clear It. It's one of the safer chemicals to handle, but as with all chemicals, you need to follow the directions on the label. About 2 weeks later, we contoured the soil, following the designer's plan, to channel any rainstorm or spring runoff toward our lawn area and the spots where we're going to put some high water use plants. We also put in our trickle irrigation system, so we can put flexible drip tubing around our plants and in the vegetable beds when the planting is done. After the soil was ready, we added the hardscape, the space that does not require watering. Our deck, designed for shade during the early part of the day and informal entertaining in the evening. It shades the soil, allows rainwater to drip through, and increases soil moisture from which nearby root systems draw. Our little pond is also another area of hardscape. It will act as a catch basin for rainwater that would normally run off into the gutters. Now, we created our pond from a kit, but there are plenty of do-it-yourself books at the library that will help you design and build your very own. The use of paving stones for our walkways allows some of the water to seep through into the soil below. Now, the walkways are built lower than the beds and crowned slightly in the middle, so they will act as a channel to get the rainwater to run where we want it to go. Our new trees were added next, a variety of species chosen for their drought tolerance and disease resistance. Now, we really like flowering trees, so we had the designer work several into the plan. We've got non-suckering lilacs by the deck. We've got 2 muckle plums over there and an apple tree, so that we will actually have some fresh fruit as well as beautiful blossoms in the spring. Although these newly planted trees and shrubs are presently being watered with our underground trickle system, once they're established and into their 2nd or 3rd growing season, this part of the system won't be necessary unless there's a prolonged drought, and then its use will be kept to a minimum. Over here we're installing our vegetable beds. Now, there's a variety of opinion among gardening experts regarding the merits of raised beds like these, ones with walls of wood or brick high enough so that you don't have to bend over or kneel when you're doing the weeding. Of course, the soil in raised beds dries out more quickly, but gardeners say that with proper irrigation that doesn't present a problem. And of course, in the spring, soil in raised beds warms faster. Some experts feel that the ideal raised bed is 6 to 12 inches. That's 15 to 30 centimeters. Of course, you've got to amend the soil below ground level as well. To raise or not to raise is your decision, and it will depend entirely on your needs and which of the experts you decide to listen to. So that brings us back around to our lawn area here and the subject of today's show, along with a selection of appropriate plants. How to have your lawn and enjoy it too. The main attraction of a lawn is that it invites you to kick off your shoes and walk or play on it. But it also demands a lot of attention. That includes mowing, weeding, fertilizing, and a whole lot of water. Up to 4 times as much as anything else in your garden may require. That's why landscape designers today, especially those that follow the principles of xeriscaping or water conservation, recommend that the size of a lawn be dictated by function. What are you planning to use it for, and how big does it really need to be? Some communities are encouraging householders to reverse today's typical 80-20% ratio of grass to non-grass. And city administrations in some areas are revising regulations which used to require turf to be planted in the front and side yards of homes in new subdivisions. Getting back to our lawn here, all we wanted was a little turf next to the deck for visiting children to play on. Now, this part of the lawn is sheltered from our prevailing northwest wind and shaded from the sun during the hottest part of the day, so water evaporation should be kept to a minimum. We wanted a shape that would be pleasing to the eye and easier to water than a square or rectangle, so I used our hose as a way of trying out shapes to get what we wanted. We also experimented until we found a watering device with a pattern that matched the shape of the lawn, so there aren't any corners that are missed. The next question was what kind of grass to plant. Fortunately, one of the advantages of doing a show like this is that there's always experts around to answer questions like those. So I'll be right back with an expert and an answer.
For a water-saving lawn, narrow your choices. Select a type of grass with water needs that come close to being met by the amount of natural precipitation in your region.
I'm talking today to Dennis McKernan. Dennis is an instructor at Olds College in Olds, Alberta. He's also a researcher with the Prairie Turf Grass Research Center and a principal in his own company, LifeWorks Consulting and Design. And we are in Edmonton, Alberta, and we're talking turf grass, and we've got some in plots here, but please, explain the weeds.
Well, I love to see weeds in my turf grass plots. This is the low maintenance grass trials that we're looking at here. And I actually like to see the weeds there because I want to see how my grasses are going to compete against those weeds.
That's part of the research.
You bet.
So they're here in plots, they're growing side by side to different varieties, and this is to assess their suitability to the region and how they're going to stack up against the weed growth.
Well, not just the weed growth, but we're going to examine a number of different criteria, which we'll probably talk about later. But I want to see how these grasses perform in this climate, how they compete against weeds, but I want to see how they do in a low maintenance situation.
Now, right beside it here, we've got the turf grass, and we've got a little more conventional lawn area here. Our lawn, sod, turf, grass, are they all the same thing?
No, absolutely not. They're very, very different. When you look at this kind of a situation here, this would be typical of a conventional lawn. A homeowner, a residential yard would have the same species, but a much higher level of maintenance. And this is what I would call turf or sod, something like that.
Now, some questions about this. There's the old debate on mowing. Do you mow it long? Do you mow it short? And this is for water conservation. Which do you recommend?
Well, for residential yards, I would definitely recommend higher heights of cut. The higher you cut your grass at, the lower the requirement for water. So from a water conservation viewpoint, you should definitely raise the cutting height.
And with that same idea in mind, water conservation, letting the clippings lay or getting them off the lawn?
Well, there's advantages to leaving them. If you do leave them, they build up that thatch layer, and thatch can be a very good thing because it reduces the amount of evaporative losses of water from the soil itself. As well, in times when you have heavy downpours, what will happen is it will improve the water infiltration into the soil.
And speaking of infiltration into the soil, I've heard talk of aeration and the need for it. What is the criteria for needing aeration in a lawn?
Well, the criteria has to be, is the soil compacted? The reason why you aerate ground is to soften it up after it's been heavily packed from heavy traffic, lots of wear and tear on the yard.
So a normal family use really wouldn't require it unless, like you were saying before, we've got maybe
Probably
3 kids, 4 dogs, and a lot of that stuff going on. All right. I've got a very small lawn area in my backyard.
Yeah.
I'm looking at filling in the rest of that space with plants. Turf grass has got a place in that?
You bet. We've got a variety of different grasses that can be used in a low maintenance situation. Now there's a difference between a low maintenance situation and a lawn.
Right.
Within the lawn, you should be looking at some different grasses than these. But these are ideally suited for low maintenance situations. What we're examining here are 10 different grasses and a mixture of those same 10 grasses. We're going to examine these grasses and how they compete with weeds. We would want something that competes heavily with the weeds and chokes them out. We're going to examine the area cover. How quickly does it fill in and cover the area of the plot itself? We're going to look at the turf grass density. How dense do these plants form a turf? We're also going to examine the height of it. Shorter is better, then you don't have to cut it. So we're examining things like that and how they perform in mixes. We've got some agronomic species and we've got some native species. So we're going to examine mixtures of natives and mixtures of agronomic species and see which one is the better one for this particular climate.
Once all that research is done, that information will be available to the ordinary backyard gardener like myself.
Sure will. It'll be available from the Prairie Turf Research Center through their annual research report. You can get a hold of it in Olds or you can get a hold of me at the college.
Sounds good, and it's all good news, and it's nice to know that I can have my lawn and enjoy it too. I appreciate the information and the tour. This has been great. Thank you very much, Dennis.
You're quite welcome.
I'll be back in a moment with Sarah Williams, and we'll talk about some of the other plants that we're going to be putting in our backyard.
Just by changing your watering schedule to coincide more closely with your plant's natural moisture loss, you can reduce water use by up to 20%.
One of our favorite experts when it comes to questions on water-wise gardening is Sarah Williams, horticultural specialist with the Extension Division at the University of Saskatchewan. Sarah, welcome to my yard, and I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you very much.
You're just in time to give us a hand with the next of our xeriscaping principles, and that's low water use plants. Now this for me is the best part. We finally got some plants in the yard. I love flowers, I love shrubs, I love trees, but I have no idea what to plant where. I wouldn't know which flower to put next to what other flower. Now I've been making notes on questions that I wanted to ask you ever since I've known you were going to come down here, but let's start with the basics. How do you come up with a design?
Well, in your case, you wanted to conserve water, so that was the overriding principle. And the best thing to do is to group plants together in the same planting beds in accordance with their water needs. So right where we're standing now is going to be where your lawn is, and adjacent to it is going to be a rose bed, and both grass and roses, these particular kind, take a lot of water. So this is our high water use area. This is the sort of the mini oasis. And the rest of the yard, if you look at the whole yard and the plant material that's in it, it's all drought-tolerant plant material.
Now, are all of these perennials, and if they are, is there any place in a yard like this, in what I want, is there any place for annuals?
These are all perennials, but there certainly is room for annuals as long as they're drought-tolerant ones. I'd put them on tubs and baskets and boxes on your deck to break up that great big expanse of just wood.
So there is a place for some annuals then?
Oh, for sure.
All right. Now, we've planted all of these in the spring. Is it necessary to plant only in the spring, or can you plant at other times of the year? Now, and while we're on that subject, how much water do you need when you're putting these things in the ground?
You can plant at almost any time of the year. Almost all of these plants were in either balled or burlapped, or they were in containerized stock. So they can go in from early as spring when the ground is thawed up until the end of August. If on the other hand, you have bare-rooted material, then it should only go in at spring.
Containerized any time of the year, bare-rooted just in spring.
Right.
Okay, now water. How much?
You want to water to the depth of that entire root ball and to get into the soil below that root ball. So if you think of something like this peony over here, it was in a pot about that big. That was the depth of its root ball. So you want to make sure that the water goes into the root ball and into the soil below when you do it.
So the key is a really good soaking to set them.
A really good soaking to set them.
Okay.
And think about the spruce tree. It had a root ball that was probably about 2.5, 3 feet deep. So when you water that, you have to think of how long it's going to take for that water to get all the way through that root ball and into the soil below.
So it's going to take a good soaking. Just sprinkling the surfaces isn't going to do you any good at all.
No good at all whatsoever.
Now, my next question is mulch. I'm a fan of it. Now, how soon do you put it on? Can I put mulch on here now, or are you going to put mulch on? And what kind are you going to use?
On the flower bed here,
Yeah.
we're going to put it on right away. As soon as you've planted and you've watered, you can put it on.
That quickly?
Yeah, what you want to do is sort of just put it right up to the edge of your plants. You want a 4-inch depth, so it would sort of go down and then come up again. Here, you would sort of tuck it up underneath. And some people don't like grass clippings.
That's what you're going to use, is grass
We're going to use
Okay.
grass clippings. They might not like it. They'll say that it sort of doesn't look right. So what you do, you fool them. You put about a 1/4-inch layer of coarse peat moss on the top. Now that's just a top dressing. It's totally cosmetic.
A little cosmetic. You make it
it's,
look good and keep the neighbors
Yeah,
happy.
it's
and
the grass
that's
clippings that
great.
are actually doing
All right.
the job for you. Now where we've got trees and shrubs over here, we're going to use wood chips. And again, a 4-inch layer. And as soon as you've planted, as soon as you've watered, that's the time that you
Okay.
want to put it in.
Now, while we're dealing with our trees and our shrubs, we've got most of them in now. I've noticed that in some yards, walking around the neighborhood and getting some ideas, that there were guy wires and stakes supporting some of these things. And we have none of that here. Were they not needed, or was there any particular reason you didn't use them?
Well, these plants or trees aren't that tall, and they had a huge root ball that was terribly heavy, so they're really not going to move. They're not going to go anywhere.
They're well anchored.
They're well anchored,
Good
and
enough.
if you had a larger tree and maybe a windier area with a relatively smaller root ball, I think that would be justified. But right now, there's no need to
So in a
anchor
case,
them
in
at
a case
all.
like that, you'd look at maybe staking or guy wiring something.
Yeah.
Okay, now still with the trees. We have an underground irrigation system here that is taking care of their watering needs now. How long do they have to be on that system? Is it something they're going to need all throughout their lives, or is it something we can taper off?
It's the sort of thing that you've really got to be careful about the first 2 growing seasons, that they're watered less frequently but very deeply.
Okay.
Think about the depth of the roots. You want to go down about 3 feet. And it doesn't matter if you're watering them with a hose or if you have an automated system. The principles are still the same. You're still in control even if you have your automated system. And less frequent and deeper watering is better.
Okay, so a really good soaking every week or 10 days is going to do these trees much more good than if I just came out every evening and kind of wet the top of the dirt.
For sure.
All right, sounds good. Now, I have one other question, and that regards the planting of native plant material. I know some experts who are promoting xeriscaping and water conservation recommend doing this, and I would like to put in some native plant material somewhere if it's possible. I have no idea where to start. What do you recommend?
Well, I think you have to define native first of all. Do you mean within a 30-mile radius, or do you mean covering all of North America? Then you have to realize that not all native plant material is drought tolerant. Some of it grows in bogs. And the worst part of it for the homeowner, but they don't usually know it, is that they've got to educate themselves. I mean, how many of us can recognize the difference between a seedling of a gaillardia and a seedling of a sow thistle?
Oh, I wouldn't.
Okay, so when all these seeds come up, are you going to know the difference?
So I'm either going to be putting
So
up seeds or flowers.
that's the real problem, I think, with it, is that you have to learn what the difference is in the seedlings. Otherwise, you're going to get a big mass of
So anybody
weeds.
looking at planting native material is going to have to put in at least as much research as they did on their perennials.
For sure, you've
All
got to
right.
do your homework on that as well.
Sarah, I thank you very much
Oh, you're
for your
very
time, your
welcome.
patience, and your energy, and I do hope to see you again very shortly. And thank you again for all the help in my yard.
You're very welcome. Bye for now.
Effective mulches allow water to penetrate the soil around your plants to reduce surface evaporation and help control weeds.
Well, that's the next stage in our yard makeover. It's also the next in our series of 7 xeriscape principles. Today the focus has been on lawns, designing one to suit your own needs, choosing the right turf, and how to look after one in order to conserve water and keep it healthy. We've also got most of the flowers and shrubs planted. They're all points covered in the 7 principles of xeriscaping, or water-wise gardening. Plan your garden so it will use water as efficiently as possible. Keep only as much lawn as your activities really require. Check your watering practices and equipment to avoid overwatering or underwatering. Find out what your soil needs to increase its ability to conserve water. Appropriate mulches can reduce weed growth, evaporation, and erosion. Choose trees, shrubs, flowers, and ground covers that are well adapted to your region and that are mainly thrifty water users. Careless gardening habits waste millions of gallons of water a year. Being water-wise means being careful. Those are smart principles, and they're ones we're trying to garden by. Next time, we're going to take a look at vegetable beds in our xeriscaped yard, what to do about our berry bushes, and how to deal with weeds and diseases. I hope you'll join us then. I'm Dale Simmons, and remember, it's your yard. If you would like to order your copy of the It's Your Yard workbook and accompanying video, please call 1-800-663-1653.